You believe you think. You believe you choose. That your opinions are yours, the fruit of experience, logic, truth. But what if all of this is just a construction? A comfortable narrative you repeat to yourself because facing reality head-on would be simply too painful? What if what you call thought is in fact a reflection, an echo of external voices you absorbed without noticing, shaped by algorithms that deciphered your anger before you even recognized it, programmed by old traumas and systems that profit from your emotional predictability? You think, but what if thought has already been replaced? Not by obvious ignorance, but by something more insidious. Automatic reactions, manipulated emotions, canned certainties in ready-made phrases, repeated without friction, without questioning, without pause. When was the last time you truly changed your mind about something you believed deeply? When was the last time you felt discomfort with one of your opinions and, instead of pushing it away, decided to listen to what that discomfort wanted to tell you?
Freedom of thought is a beautiful idea, but in practice, it's rare. Because thinking truly hurts. Thinking threatens your beliefs, your identity, your bonds. Thinking disorganizes what you've spent years trying to keep stable. And that's why most don't think. They just react, confirm, share, repeat. Ignoring this call has a cost. And it's not just ignorance. It's forgetting who you really are. The slow and silent distancing from your own inner truth. Today, we're going to descend together to that blind spot. And we're not here seeking quick answers. We're here seeking courage. The courage to look within and ask with brutal honesty, what if I'm no longer thinking? What if my freedom is just a carefully projected illusion? It's not an easy video, but perhaps it's the most important one you'll watch this year. Because it doesn't talk about others, it talks about you. You learned early on that thinking is your right, that no one can take away your ideas, your opinions, your conclusions about the world. You believed, like so many, that freedom of thought is something you have, almost like an automatic gift, guaranteed by consciousness and education. But what no one told you is that thinking isn't a gift, it's a choice. And like every choice, it requires effort, consciousness, courage. Real thought doesn't happen by inertia. It requires presence. It requires friction. And more than anything, it requires the willingness to lose certainties, lose identity, lose belonging. Perhaps you've never stopped to observe what exists behind one of your opinions. Perhaps you've never interrogated the invisible path between what you feel and what you believe. But that path exists, and it's treacherous, because what we call thought rarely springs from pure reason. It springs from fear, from the need to be right, from the desire for belonging, from the comfort of not having to doubt anything. Have you noticed how the ideas we defend most are often those we question least? How what we feel most strongly is usually what we investigate least? This isn't chance. It's mechanism. It's protection. Our brain doesn't seek truth. It seeks consistency. And consistency almost always means repeating what we've thought before, what we've heard before, what the group already believes. This is where the real problem begins, because the illusion of freedom of thought isn't in being forced to believe something. It's in being led slowly to believe that we were the ones who chose. The most effective prison isn't the one where you perceive the bars. It's the one where you believe you're free. That's why we need to descend, not to a comfortable place, but to the most sensitive point of this journey. The moment when you begin to realize that your mind may have grown accustomed to repeating, confirming, obeying, believing it was choosing. The moment when you begin to suspect that maybe, just maybe, you're more programmed than free.
You live surrounded by stimuli that demand your immediate reaction. Headlines, notifications, comments, catchphrases, quick promises, instant indignations. Everything is designed to pull you, to accelerate you, to occupy you. But what almost no one perceives is that in this incessant flow, something essential is being silently corroded: your capacity to think for yourself. Thinking requires pause, and pause today is almost a crime. In the current world, reflecting is a sign of weakness, of doubt, of hesitation. Those who hesitate lose. Those who pause are overtaken. Those who question are called annoying, naive, subversive. And that's how you begin to give in. Not all at once, but gradually. You adapt your thinking to the external rhythm. You adjust your certainties to the group's expectations. You stop asking what you feel to merely repeat what you hear. And when you realize it, you're reproducing ideas that aren't even your own. You might pride yourself on your independence, but think honestly. How many of your opinions are actually the fruits of solitary, silent, uncomfortable thought? How many were born from true internal confrontation, the kind that requires reviewing positions, facing your own prejudices, redrawing the mental maps with which you navigate the world? The truth is harsh. Most of us don't think. We react. And this reaction isn't random. It's cultivated. It's profitable. The more predictable you are, the more manipulable you become. Social networks don't want your reflection. They want your engagement. Algorithms don't offer you what you need. They offer you what keeps you clicking. The system doesn't care if you understand. It wants you to consume, share, believe. Thinking has become a threat. Therefore, freedom of thought is today an act of resistance, a radical gesture, an active refusal to be carried away by the current of speed, convenience, easy acceptance. Thinking today is swimming against everything, against urgency, against the shouting, against others' certainty, and above all, against your own tendency toward comfort. Because deep down, you know, questioning hurts. Truly thinking implies stripping yourself of certainties, and no lie is more seductive than the one that protects your identity. The illusion of choice is more dangerous than coercion, because it convinces you that you're free, when, in truth, you're no longer. There comes a moment, inevitable, when you're confronted with an inner choice. And it's not a philosophical, theoretical, abstract choice. It's concrete, silent, and profoundly solitary. You stand before two doors. In one, the comfort of repeating what the group already accepts, what the family already believes, what the algorithm has already approved. In the other, the unease of walking alone, doubting your own ideas, admitting that perhaps, just perhaps, everything you defended for so long was merely a defense, a protection, emotional armor. You want to be faithful to yourself, but you also want to be loved. You want to be respected. You want to feel you belong. And that's where the fracture is born. Because thinking with autonomy often means distancing yourself. It means losing applause. It means risking being misunderstood, discredited, excluded. This is the real dilemma. Truth can isolate you. Lies don't. Lies embrace you, give you a group, an identity, a name. Lies make you feel right even when you're wrong. Lies protect you from doubt, from silence, from emptiness. They envelop you with voices that say what you want to hear and call it freedom. Remember the last time you sat at dinner with family, listening to them repeat opinions that made your stomach churn with their simplicity? You opened your mouth to speak, felt the complexity of what you really thought, and then closed it. You smiled. You nodded. You chose the comfort of their approval over the discomfort of your truth. In that moment, something inside you dimmed. A small betrayal, almost imperceptible.
but real.
Or think of that meeting at work when someone said something you knew was wrong, not just factually, but morally. You felt the heat rise in your chest, the words forming on your tongue. But then you calculated your position, your relationships, your future, and you stayed silent. You told yourself it wasn't worth the fight, that picking your battles was wisdom. But deep down, you knew it was fear. These moments accumulate, like sediment in a river. They build up until the current of your authenticity slows to a trickle. You become someone who agrees to be agreeable, someone who nods to belong, someone who has traded the sharp edge of truth for the smooth surface of acceptance. This is the birth of the conscious exile, the one who sees but chooses blindness, who knows but chooses ignorance, who feels the pull of authenticity but chooses the gravity of conformity. The conscious exile lives in a peculiar hell, aware enough to feel the betrayal, but scared enough to continue perpetrating it. And there's a particular loneliness to this exile, because you can't complain about it. You chose it. You can't blame others for your silence. You enforced it. You become complicit in your own disappearance, and that complicity tastes like ash in your mouth every time you swallow words that wanted to be born.
But there's a price. And this price accumulates in silence. A discomfort that grows within you, like a crack under the varnish of certainties. A part of you begins to perceive that something is wrong, that there's something false, plastic, rehearsed in the speeches you repeat. You hear yourself speaking, and deep down you know that something there no longer resonates with truth. But you continue, because stopping requires courage. And courage at this point hurts more than pretending. You begin to distrust your own voice, to wonder, is this certainty really mine? Or am I just protecting an image I created myself and that I'm now afraid to abandon? You start recognizing the taste of borrowed thoughts in your mouth. They feel foreign, like clothes that don't quite fit. You notice how your energy drains when you defend positions that aren't truly yours. How exhausting it becomes to maintain opinions you've never truly examined. How heavy the armor of false certainty has become. And here's where the real choice begins. Not between right and wrong, but between living a comfortable lie or sustaining an uncomfortable truth. Between being accepted by a group or being faithful to yourself. Between maintaining appearances or listening to conscience. And you already know. There's a type of betrayal that doesn't scream, that doesn't expel, that doesn't leave visible scars, but that, with time, consumes everything you are. It's the betrayal of silencing your own lucidity to maintain others' affection. It's the betrayal of not thinking in order to continue belonging. The world might not even notice, but you notice. And this discomfort you feel now, it's not an error. It's the beginning of awakening.
There's a moment when something changes. It's not explosive nor dramatic. It's subtle, almost imperceptible, but profound. It's when you begin to look at your own thinking with strangeness. It's when you stop repeating and start listening. In this moment, everything slows down. The speed of certainties gives way to a strange silence, a space between stimulus and response. A pause that once seemed dangerous now begins to seem alive. You feel you can breathe there, that you can think without hurry, that you can finally ask, what of all this is really mine? But first, there's friction, real friction. It happens in your chest, like two tectonic plates grinding against each other. One part of you, the part that has learned to survive by agreeing, panics at this new questioning. It whispers urgently, don't rock the boat, don't complicate things, just go along, it's safer. But another part, a part that has been buried under years of compliance, begins to stir.
This part tastes the air of possible authenticity and hungers for more. It says, quietly but insistently, what if what they think of you matters less than what you think of yourself? What if being wrong but honest is better than being right but hollow? The friction intensifies. You feel it in your body, a tightness in your throat when you want to speak truth, a heaviness in your stomach when you consider the cost of authenticity. It's the physical sensation of a soul trying to break free from its comfortable prison.
You notice it first in small moments. When someone asks your opinion about something controversial, and instead of immediately reaching for the safe answer, you pause. You actually pause. And in that pause, you feel something unprecedented. Space. Space to actually consider what you think, not what you should think. The sensation is disorienting, like removing headphones you didn't realize you were wearing. Suddenly, you can hear your own thoughts more clearly. They're not louder, they're just cleaner, less contaminated by the need to please, to fit, to survive socially. This question doesn't bring immediate answers, but it brings something more important, a displacement. You stop being just someone who reacts, and you become someone who observes, someone who, even facing group pressure, decides to sustain the discomfort of not knowing. Someone who, even hearing all the voices shouting for conformity, chooses to listen to the only one that was forgotten, your own. It's at this point that fear begins to dissolve, not because the world became easier, but because something inside you became firmer. You begin to perceive that doubt isn't your enemy, it's your proof of sanity. That internal friction isn't a sign of failure, it's a sign of presence. That the solitude of authentic thought isn't punishment, it's seed. You begin to experience a different freedom, not the freedom to do what you want, say what you want, post what you want, but the freedom to not need approval, the freedom to not give in to automatic indignation, the freedom to say, I don't know, without shame, the freedom to change your mind without collapsing your identity. And then something precious happens. You begin to choose what was once unconscious. You begin to filter what you once accepted without questioning. You begin to feel a new type of strength that doesn't shout, doesn't impose, doesn't please. A silent interior strength, the strength of being someone who thinks.
Before we continue to the next step, before we begin to rebuild with clarity your inner autonomy, I want you to stop for an instant. If this message is touching you, if you felt at some moment that this silent battle also happens within you, leave a comment down below saying, I choose my thought. 3 words, not to prove anything to anyone, but as a gesture of presence, an intimate, subtle, but powerful declaration that you made it this far, that even crossing through discomfort, you didn't retreat. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now is a good moment. This journey is just beginning, and there's much more to feel, remember, and awaken.
The time has come to stop talking, to suspend the need to explain, to justify, to protect yourself with arguments. Now, all that's required of you is one gesture. Retreat. Not from weakness, but from respect for what begins to be born within silence. There exists a type of listening that only happens when the world falls silent. When you distance yourself from external voices and allow yourself, at last, to hear what was always muffled by noise, not others' ideas, but the subtle signals of your own thought. In this instant, you might perceive a void, but this void isn't absence, it's space, an internal space that was covered for years by automatic opinions, recycled certainties, inherited narratives. And now, in this space, you can finally breathe. You can feel the texture of doubt, the taste of raw honesty, the echo of the question you never had the courage to ask. What if all this is still mine? At first, it's disconcerting. You notice how far you've drifted from yourself, how much of your energy was dedicated to sustaining versions, maintaining positions, protecting fragile narratives. All of this now begins to crumble, not with violence, but with a type of silent sadness. It's mourning for the character you created to adapt, a character that needed to seem right, seem firm, seem wise, even when it was exhausted, confused, and lost. Think of it as entering an inner desert, not the barren wasteland of popular imagination, but the vast, sacred desert of contemplatives. Here in this temple of stillness, time moves differently. Your heartbeat becomes audible. Your breath deepens without effort. The constant chatter of mental commentary begins to fade, like radio static slowly being tuned out. In this desert, you begin to feel the physical reality of turning inward. Your gaze softens, no longer scanning for threats or opportunities for performance. Your shoulders drop as you release the burden of maintaining your image. Your jaw unclenches as you stop preparing arguments you might need to defend yourself with. Even your posture changes, less rigid, more receptive, more honest.
And in this crumbling, you begin to see what was hidden beneath the surface. Forgotten memories of moments when you said yes, wanting to say no, of ideas you defended without having thought them through, of opinions you absorbed just to be accepted. And all of this surfaces like a receding tide, revealing what was always there, but that now you finally have the courage to look at. It's uncomfortable, but it's also profoundly liberating, because for the first time in a long time, you're not trying to win a debate. You're not defending yourself. You're not seeking to fit in. You simply are, naked before your own consciousness, raw before your own history. And this being, simple and brutal, is the beginning of something new. In this silence, a new listening begins to emerge. Not listening to the world, but listening to yourself. A listening that doesn't demand proof, that doesn't charge coherence, that doesn't seek security. It just listens to breathing, to raw thought, to intuition, to nameless sadness, to anger without target, to the fear of not knowing who you are. All of this appears, and for the first time, you don't push it away. You allow it. And the more you allow, the more you feel something emerge. A core, a presence, something that doesn't need to be explained, but that is there, firm, silent, indestructible. Perhaps you've never connected with this before. Perhaps you forgot what it's like to inhabit your own lucidity without needing to defend yourself. But now it's returning. And from this presence, from this silent center, will come reconstruction.
After silence, something begins to reorganize. It's not like returning to the old world. It's like returning to yourself. The difference is subtle, but decisive. Because now you're no longer trying to fit into the rhythm of others' ideas. You're beginning to listen to the rhythm of your own consciousness, and this changes everything. There's no explosion of answers, but there's a new disposition to remain with questions. And this is perhaps the most radical of changes. You stop seeking immediate certainties and begin to cultivate presence. Presence before complexity. Presence before ambiguity. Presence before your own ignorance, without shame, without escape, without arrogance. It's from this presence that thought begins to be reborn, not as reaction, but as practice. You learn to breathe before opining, to listen before countering, to question before affirming. Small gestures that together form an ethic, a different way of being in the world. You begin to perceive that thinking isn't a privilege, it's a craft, an exercise of attention, of humility, of continuous listening. And like every craft, it requires discipline. You begin to create your own rituals, moments of silence before responding to a provocation, pauses to investigate where your certainty comes from, the intentional search for perspectives that challenge you, not as penance, but as a way of sharpening the mind without hardening the heart. These rituals become micro acts of intellectual freedom. When someone sends you an inflammatory news article, instead of immediately sharing your outrage, you pause. You ask, what is this trying to make me feel? What reaction is being cultivated in me? When a heated conversation begins at dinner, instead of jumping in with your prepared position, you choose to listen first. Really listen, not for ammunition to use in your counter-argument, but for understanding. You notice how different it feels to scroll through social media with this new awareness. The algorithm still tries to hook you with content designed to trigger immediate emotional responses, but now you can see the machinery at work. You watch your own impulses, the urge to share something that makes you feel superior, the temptation to engage in arguments that will lead nowhere, the pull toward content that confirms what you already believe. And sometimes you just don't. You close the app, you take a walk, you choose presence over performance.
In conversations, you discover the radical act of saying, I don't know, or I need to think about that. These phrases, which once felt like admissions of failure, now feel like acts of integrity. You realize that the people worth knowing respect your honesty more than your certainty. And those who don't, well, their disappointment tells you more about them than about you. You begin to distinguish between thinking and reacting with surgical precision. Reacting happens in the body first, the flush of anger, the tightness in your chest, the urge to strike back immediately. Thinking happens in the pause after that initial reaction. It's the moment when you breathe, step back, and ask, what is really happening here? What do I actually know? What am I assuming? This distinction transforms your daily interactions. When someone disagrees with you, instead of immediately marshaling your defenses, you get curious. When you feel the urge to post something sarcastic or clever, you pause and ask, am I trying to contribute something valuable, or am I just performing my intelligence? When news breaks that seems to confirm your worldview, you intentionally seek out sources that challenge your initial interpretation. You discover, finally, that thinking isn't protecting yourself. It's exposing yourself. It's putting yourself at risk, the risk of changing, of learning, of recognizing that what you thought was right might have just been convenient. You perceive that true intellectual courage isn't in having all the answers, but in remaining integral before difficult questions. And in this process, you rediscover a strength that doesn't come from certainty, but from sincerity. The strength of being in contact with something that is yours, a clearer gaze, a more honest silence, a deeper curiosity. You no longer think to win, you think to understand. You no longer think to convince, you think to approach. You no longer think to sustain a character, you think to sustain a soul. And it's in this reunion with thought as sacred practice that you begin at last to live more wholly. Who chooses the lie becomes a slave to the lie. Kierkegaard wrote this not as someone pointing out another's error, but as someone who knows the weight of betraying oneself from within. Now, after everything you felt, perhaps this phrase gains new meaning, because the most dangerous lie isn't the one they tell you, it's the one you tell yourself. The one that says you're free, even when you've already handed your mind over to algorithms, groups, ideologies, fears. Today, you can see with greater clarity the cycle that forms. First, haste, then repetition, next, belief, and finally, forgetting. Forgetting that you could stop, forgetting that you could think, forgetting that it was possible to say, I don't know. Now you begin to remember,
To remember that free thought doesn't come from certainty, but from the courage to inhabit discomfort. You perceive that thinking, truly, was never easy, because it's more than a cognitive function. It's a spiritual commitment. It's the daily decision not to anesthetize your own lucidity, the choice not to hide behind ready-made phrases, not to sell your consciousness in exchange for belonging. And you know there will still be difficult days, days when it will be tempting to return to the comfort of easy ideas, days when silence will seem too heavy. But now something has changed, because now you know the way back, and more importantly, you know yourself enough to perceive when you begin to lose yourself. Imagine your inner landscape as an abandoned house that you're slowly cleaning and reclaiming. Years of neglect have left rooms cluttered with borrowed opinions, inherited prejudices, unexamined beliefs. But now, room by room, you're clearing the space. You're opening windows to let in fresh air. You're lighting candles in corners that have been dark for too long. It's slow work, this renovation of the soul. But with each cleared space, you can breathe a little deeper. You can see a little clearer. You can be a little more yourself. This is the dawn after a long night of unconsciousness. The sun doesn't rise all at once. It comes gradually, painting the sky in subtle gradations of light. And that's how your awakening feels now. Not dramatic, but steady. Not perfect, but real. Each day, a little more light. Each choice, a little more freedom. Each pause, a little more presence. This is true freedom, not the one that protects you from the world, but the one that reconnects you to your dignity. The one that gives you courage to think, even when thinking hurts. The one that returns you little by little to the truth that lives behind the image, and that reminds you, with firmness and compassion, you're not here to repeat, you're here to awaken.
If you made it this far, it's because you needed this message. Not by chance, not by distraction, but by an internal calling you might not have known how to name until now. And since you found this path, I want to invite you to continue. Go to our most recent video, The Invisible Pain of Those Who Think Too Much. There, we talk about the emotional cost of being someone who feels and thinks deeply in a world that rewards superficiality. It's an intimate dive into the silent pains of those who see too much, and still continue. If you recognized yourself in this journey, this is the next step your heart is already asking for. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, consider doing so now. Not for us, but for you. Because there are parts of you that still need to be seen, heard, remembered. And we're here to walk alongside you, step by step, in this return to your wholeness. Until next time, take care of your mind, your soul, and your truth. You're not alone on this path. Not anymore.